story is blended with the movie, the watches to make it more interesting. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. The biting wind whipped through the gnarled branches of the ancient Irish forest, whistling a tune as eerie as a banshee's wail. Shadows, cast by the pale, skeletal fingers of the moon, twisted and danced around me, mocking my solitude. They called me Horrible Face, a moniker earned not by choice, but by the cruel hand of fate. My visage, once lauded for its artistic grace, was now a tapestry of pain, a grotesque mask that mirrored the horrors I'd witnessed. I sought solace in this desolate woodland, hoping the whispering leaves might drown out the screams that echoed in my mind. But this forest held secrets, dark and ancient, and I, the outsider, was about to become entangled in its sinister web. My tale began not in this emerald labyrinth, but in the heart of a vibrant city, where I, a celebrated artist, once lived a life of color and light. My paintings, vibrant and full of life, adorned the walls of prestigious galleries, but destiny, it seemed, had other plans. A fire, as swift and merciless as a demon's wrath, consumed my studio, leaving me a charred husk, a macabre parody of my former self. My face, my canvas, was forever marred, a chilling reflection of the inferno that had robbed me of my identity. Shunned by the society that once embraced me, I sought refuge in the wilderness, hoping to find peace amidst the solitude. But even in this emerald embrace, solace eluded me. The whispers started subtly, like the rustling of leaves, tales of creatures that lurked in the shadows, beings that preyed on those foolish enough to wander after dark. At first, I dismissed them as mere folklore, the ramblings of superstitious minds. But deep down, a seed of unease had been planted, its tendrils reaching for the darkest corners of my soul. One night, as I sought shelter beneath a towering yew, a blood-curdling scream pierced the stillness of the night. It was a raw, visceral cry, filled with a terror that resonated deep within me. The scream came from somewhere deep within the forest, a desperate plea lost in the labyrinthine embrace of the woods. I, the one they called Horrible Face, the one who should have turned away from such horrors, felt a strange compulsion, a morbid curiosity, drawing me towards the source of the scream. I pushed through the dense undergrowth, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The trees, their branches intertwined overhead, formed a suffocating canopy, blocking out the meager moonlight. Each step I took was filled with trepidation, my heart pounding against my ribs like a captive bird. The screams had ceased, replaced by an unsettling silence, a silence that spoke volumes of the darkness that lay ahead. As I stumbled through the oppressive gloom, I came upon a clearing bathed in an ethereal, unnatural glow. In the center stood a strange, crudely built hut, its windows emanating a sickly yellow light. It was a jarring sight, a beacon of humanity in the heart of this primeval forest. I approached cautiously, my senses on high alert, the echo of that chilling scream still ringing in my ears. As I drew closer, I could hear voices emanating from within the hut, hushed and urgent, their tones laced with fear. I pressed my ear against the rough-hewn logs, straining to decipher the words that tumbled from their lips. They spoke of something called the Watchers, creatures that stalked the night, their eyes glowing like embers in the darkness. They spoke of rules, a twisted code of survival designed to appease these shadowy entities. I peered through a crack in the wall, my heart pounding against my ribs. Inside, huddled in the dim light, were 4 figures, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes wide with terror. They were like moths drawn to a flame, trapped in this isolated haven, their lives hanging by a thread. A young woman, her blonde hair woven into a tight braid, clutched a small cage containing a vibrantly colored bird. 2 men, their faces etched with worry, stood by the window, their gazes scanning the impenetrable darkness beyond the glass. And seated in a rocking chair, her wrinkled face illuminated by the flickering light, was an old woman, her lips moving in silent prayer. I listened intently, my blood turning to ice as their story unfolded. The old woman, her voice raspy with age, spoke of the rules they must follow to survive the night. No one must venture outside after dark. No one must enter the burrows, those subterranean tunnels where the creatures dwelled during the day. Each word she uttered sent shivers down my spine. I, the fool who had wandered blindly through the woods, had already broken the first rule. My presence here, a violation of their fragile sanctuary, could spell doom for us all. As if sensing my intrusion, the younger man spun around, his eyes widening in horror. "Look," he gasped, pointing towards the window. I followed his gaze, my breath catching in my throat. Standing at the edge of the clearing, their silhouettes barely discernible in the gloom, were 3 figures. They were vaguely humanoid in shape, but their movements were jerky and unnatural, their limbs contorting at impossible angles. Their faces were shrouded in shadow, but I could feel their malevolent gaze burning into me, like the heat from a furnace. The Watchers, the creatures of the whispers. Panic surged through the hut, a palpable wave of fear that threatened to consume them all. The younger man, his voice thick with terror, urged the others to barricade the door. But the old woman, her eyes flickering with a strange light, shook her head. "It's too late," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the pounding of my heart. "They've seen him." Terror, cold and paralyzing, gripped me like a vise. I had stumbled into a nightmare, a macabre play where I was both spectator and victim. The creatures began to move, gliding towards the hut with an eerie silence that amplified the sense of dread. They moved with a predatory grace, like wolves stalking their prey. I knew I had to run, but my legs felt like lead, my body frozen in place by the sheer horror of it all. The old woman's voice, surprisingly calm amidst the chaos, broke through the fog of fear. "Run," she said, her gaze fixed on me, her eyes filled with a strange mix of pity and resignation. "Run to the river. It's your only chance." Her words, a lifeline thrown into the abyss, jolted me into action. I spun around, crashing through the undergrowth, heedless of the thorns that tore at my flesh. The forest seemed to close in around me, the darkness pressing down like a suffocating weight. I could hear the creatures behind me, their heavy footfalls a terrifying counterpoint to the pounding of my heart. I ran blindly, driven by primal fear, the image of those glowing eyes seared into my mind. Ahead, through a break in the trees, I glimpsed the river, its surface shimmering like a ribbon of hope in the moonlight. But as I stumbled towards the bank, gasping for breath, the old woman's lie became horrifyingly clear. The river wasn't my salvation, but my tomb. Standing on the opposite bank, their forms silhouetted against the moonlit sky, were dozens of the creatures. Their eyes, burning with an unholy light, were fixed on me, their prey, their offering. I was trapped, surrounded by a nightmare that was all too real. The creatures began to cross the river, their movements swift and silent, their gaze unwavering. I backed away, my heart threatening to burst from my chest, my mind reeling with terror. There was nowhere left to run, no sanctuary in this cursed forest. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable, waiting for the cold embrace of death. But the attack never came. When I opened my eyes, the clearing was empty. The creatures vanished as if they were nothing more than figments of my tormented imagination. The silence was deafening, broken only by the gentle murmur of the river and the frantic beating of my heart. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, trembling with shock and exhaustion, trying to comprehend the incomprehensible. Had they spared me? Or was this merely a reprieve, a cruel jest before the final curtain fell? I didn't know, and perhaps it was better that way. Ignorance, in this case, might be the only solace I could find. I turned away from the river, my steps slow and heavy, the weight of my encounter pressing down on me like a physical burden. I was no longer the man I once was, the artist who saw beauty in the world. I was Horrible Face, a creature of the shadows, marked by fire and forever haunted by the horrors I had witnessed. But I was alive, for now. And in this forest, where darkness reigned supreme and the night was alive with terrors, that was all that mattered. I continued my journey through the haunted woodland, my senses heightened, my every step filled with apprehension. The whispers followed me, a constant reminder of the unseen presence that lurked just beyond my perception. I had glimpsed the darkness that lay at the heart of this forest, a darkness that threatened to consume me whole. But I had also glimpsed something else, something that flickered like a faint ember in the depths of my despair. Hope, a fragile, elusive thing, but a hope nonetheless. A hope that I might find a way to navigate this labyrinth of fear, a hope that I might somehow survive the night and greet the dawn. This is my story, the story of Horrible Face, the one who dared to venture into the heart of darkness and lived to tell the tale. A tale of terror and survival, of loss and the fragile glimmer of hope that persists even in the face of unimaginable horror. It is a story that is still being written, a story whose ending remains shrouded in the shadows, waiting to be revealed.